Okay, and we should be on the air. Great. All right then. So we are playing Dungeon World. We are playing a Mask at Midnight, which is a name that I made up because at my time it is midnight, and we're going to see how long the GM can last before falling asleep in his chair. I'm Joe, and
I have had that happen actually.
yeah, well, roll plus sleep on a on a six or less mark experience and just crash out. Um, So I have Alexander with me today playing Cadius, the fighter, and Michael Prescott, uh, playing Oliver the thief.
Hello.
You guys want to just introduce yourselves quickly? Say a couple of words for anyone watching this. Alexander, let's start with you.
Sure thing. So I'm Alex. I'm from Rhode Island in the United States. I've played a bunch of role-playing games, a lot of Dungeon World, but I'm usually on the GM side of things, so it'll be fun to actually be a player for a change. So I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
Sweet. I'm Michael. I have not played a lot of Dungeon World. I've played a bit of World of Dungeons, which I enjoyed tremendously. And I played the Regiment, so I'm pretty familiar with Marvel's World hacks. But most of my gaming in the last few years has been with Burning Wheel, and I'm in a similar position. I spend a lot of time behind the screen. Although we don't have a screen anymore. Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. And of course, probably worth mentioning Michael's very awesome on-page dungeons as well.
Oh yeah.
Shameless plug. But yeah, go
Oh,
for
thank you.
it. So yeah, definitely. I should probably also say my stuff. So I'm Joe, but you probably already knew that because it says at the bottom of the screen. I do Dungeon World Adventures on Patreon and on Drive for RPG and other various places. And yeah, I'm going to be your humble and merciful GM. Yes, okay, cool. So
Not too
let's get
merciful, I hope.
started. uh, right, so Alex, let's start. Tell us a little bit about Cadius the fighter.
Sure. So I mean, I don't have a lot of concrete ideas. More of an unarmed style fighter, quick, graceful. Um, kind of had the idea for someone who was like the opposite of the typical Fae or something. So instead of like the elves coming and stealing a human child, it would be like the elves were out in the woods, deep in the mountains, and then the human raiders came and would occasionally steal children from the elves and raise them. So
Cool.
that's sort of like I don't know the idea I had. Trying to figure out what the heritage moves might mean, what they mean to him, but
Mhm.
nothing concrete right now, just some vague ideas. It's cool.
Okay, sounds good. Um, Michael, do you want to tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about Oliver of Failspeak?
Well, Oliver is from Mirkasa, but I don't think he's there anymore. Although I'm not, we haven't decided where we are actually. But
Sure.
as I get it from the document I've been sent, Mirkasa is sort of this technologically inclined theocracy, and I think I see myself as a character who has been expected to toe the family line, and when you're in a technologically sophisticated theocracy, you're called on to do some unsavory things, and that has led me a little further afield, and I've met up with Cadius here, and we've been continuing our business of running cons and getting into all sorts of scrapes and trouble.
Nice.
Oh
So
yeah, I imagine uh, you more get into trouble and I try and get out of
yes, or, yeah, we tag team each other, but
it.
yeah, I think the strictures of the theocracy would have been much too rigid for me, but at the same time, it defines so much of my upbringing that it's always somewhere behind my eyes.
Sure. Even as someone who operates outside of the law as a thief, it's
Yes,
something that you still something that's very much a key aspect of kind of who you are and what you do. Mm.
very much so.
Cool, cool. Yes, before we go any further, just for the purposes of anyone watching this, we're playtesting a new document of mine today, something a little bit different. I'm trying above and beyond the adventures. So anyone who's been following my kind of adventures on Patreon or on Drive for RPG has probably noticed kind of a running theme of kind of names and places that have come up a couple of times, like Green Scar, Mercassa, Chalcedon Imperium, these sorts of things. Broadly speaking, these are just names, but one idea I had was to do a kind of plain art codex style heritage moves thing, but instead of basing it around monsters, base it around cultures instead. So instead of the usual race moves, both Alex and Michael have taken what I'm calling culture moves instead, which is basically these kind of ideas of the cultures based around the adventures that I've written, and kind of some ideas and some tropes based on that, and what those people might be like, or what it's understood those people might be like. We'll go into more details about the actual moves as you go into it, but if you've read Dark Heart of the Dreamer, then you've probably got a pretty strong idea about where this might be going. So we've got Mikasa here. It's kind of a grey tiger and a dense, yes, technologically oriented theocracy, like you said. And Cadius, of course, you mentioned you came from, well, it's just broadly described as kind of the savage peaks, i.e. kind of what you might consider to be barbarian wasteland. So,
Yeah.
Cadius, would you describe yourself as kind of a barbarian? Would that be appropriate, or?
Yeah, I think that would have been how he was raised, and then now he's sort of maybe in a more urban or civilized area, and he's trying to move away from that, or maybe even trying to reclaim some of the grace or noted mystique of his people. So I think that there's sort of some tension between how he acts and how he wants to act.
When was the first time he met another elf?
It probably would have been pretty recently. I'm sort of envisioning a younger character. So I'm imagining he left the mountains within the past year or two and just started meeting, people that weren't the tribesfolk and the people of the mountain.
Which is all he would have met up to that point, broadly speaking.
Yes.
What was it like when he left? Was there anyone who didn't want him to go, or was he cast out in disgrace, or anything in between?
No, I think he would have probably left, sort of unannounced almost. Just woke up one day, thinking about it for a while, and left in the night or left in the morning. And I'm sure there were people that, from where he's from, that were happy about that, and there were probably people that weren't happy about that. But he hasn't met anyone from there, or from his old life since. So
Sure.
I think he's not really sure how anyone's going to react if he ever goes back or meets anyone from there.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, as you were talking, something came clear to me, which is, I think I almost certainly would have left as a result of incompetence. Being expected to learn doctrine is something that someone of my family's station would be expected to do, and my character Oliver is much more likely to try and manipulate his way through situations like that, and there just comes a point where you can't fake it. And you've pissed enough people off. You can't be the class clown forever, and his moral flexibility put him in touch with some of the criminal element of Mercasa. So this would be kind of a dual life that I think would have been going on for a little while.
Sure, and things just came to a head after a while.
Yeah, exactly. Came to a head, whether through exams or a family confrontation.
Cool.
And then I chose the streets, but the fallen lifestyle has given me a hunger for gold coin to try and reclaim what I was used to when I was brought up. I
Sure.
deserve better.
You're used to your creature comforts,
I am.
especially from a place that's sort of on the up and up in terms of technology. I'm thinking kind of if Chalcedon, if this sort of enlightened imperium on, say, the western side is your kind of British Empire, Industrial Revolution style thing, then Mercas, in my mind at least, and feel free to jump in with your own ideas because it's, over to you as kind of the resident Mercassian here, Oliver. But my thinking is if Charleston is kind of the stable and expanding great and grand industrial revolution empire, then Macassar is the crazy place where all the gnomes have kind of been making these crazy inventions, and some have worked and some haven't. So it's been it's also an industrial revolution, but it's in more fits and starts.
Yes.
And the kind of perhaps the more kind of perhaps I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth here. This is certainly how things have worked. When I had a guy from Mercassa who was a paladin, who was a Templar, and he's like, "Well, what about the guns?" He's like, "Well, I want some cool guns." And it's like, okay, so I guess there's kind of an arms race thing going here. But maybe from your perspective, it's not quite the same.
I think they
So
wouldn't have
tell me
let
a bit
me
more
anywhere
about
near
yeah.
guns.
Fair enough.
It's yeah. I mean, it's entirely possible that during my doctrinal training that I actually caused some damage by blowing something up.
Cool. What did you blow up?
I think I probably blew the slated roof off the seminary.
Right.
The wing, at least the wing that my uncle funded.
How did your uncle take it?
He passed. It was his statue was out
Wow.
front, but the statue had its head knocked off. So
Right.
the repercussions were more through direct family members, and of course the master of the seminary was absolutely horrified.
So are you on any kind of speaking terms with any members of your family anymore?
I think there's a place for me, but they would expect me to endure such a regime of shame, and what's the word? Contrition.
Hmm.
I'm just not willing to do that. And I just don't want to face up to it because, the whole time I'm like, don't worry, it's under control. I got it fine.
Yeah.
No, I don't need your notes from my classmates. And, left under this pall of basically absolute obvious incompetence.
In the nicest possible way. Cool. Excellent. Excellent. So we've got the sort of the savage peaks. Is it the peaks as well? I mean, the peaks in the general sense. Is it actually mountaintops that the barbarian tribes, these human barbarian tribes, inhabit, or is it
No, I
another kind of
imagine it's.
untamed land?
I think it is mountains, but I'm pretty sure they don't live in the peaks. They probably live lower down.
Sure.
If anything, they would probably view that as something of sort of something that's dangerous, but also something that's sort of sacred to them.
Hmm.
The actual peaks of the mountains.
Sure. So we've got Cadius coming from not quite the peaks, but certainly from the Savage Mountains, and we've got which are mostly people by humans. We've established there aren't really any elves there, at least ones which haven't been taken there, which haven't been sort of raised from birth or sort of more or less stolen.
Yep.
And Cadius has sort of stolen himself away recently to see more of the world and to understand maybe a bit more of his heritage, maybe just get away from his forebears and life of adventure, etc., etc. And then we've got Oliver, who's kind of flunked out of his earlier years, his earlier education, and decided that sort of his rigid upbringing, it wasn't really for him. But still can't quite get away from this idea of needing his creature comforts, and thus has turned to a unruly life of crime. Excellent, excellent. So to that end, so at some point, I think you said that you've been travelling for sort of the last year or so, Cadius. So that sort of dates it for us. So is it safe to assume that the two of you have been have known each other for about a year or so? Then, should we say 18 months?
With 4 bonds, it seems likely.
Yeah, I was going to say, so that's the other thing. We've sort of decided beforehand that everyone's going to have all their bonds with each other, which is awesome. So yes, it definitely implies that you've known each other for a long time. Is 18 months long enough, or do you want to kind of retcon that 2-year date to
No,
being
I
even
think that's
longer?
okay. I mean, our lives are so transient and unstable that that's plenty of time for all sorts of adventure and getting to know each other in very stressful situations.
Okay,
Yeah, a lot can happen.
absolutely. Anything of note that's happened up to this point? Cadius, tell me about a time when your brute strength was able to pull Oliver's, backside out the fire, so to speak.
Well, he's probably been arrested more than once, and I've probably had to bash in a few doors and come and get him out.
Sure. Whose door did you bash?
Uh, Probably a sheriff, I would imagine.
Hmm. So what sort of a frontier town
Yeah.
or somewhere a bit more built up?
Probably like not quite a city, but a larger town. Yeah, maybe a port or something.
Hmm. Cool. So what were you doing in that particular port, Oliver? What particular crime was that?
Well, he likes to say that it's all my fault, but of course I was just scrounging for our dinner. A sellsword and a rogue traveling around doesn't have a steady source of income, and I've had to carry us in more than a few places. We've had our share of belt tightening, and I was just doing what needed to be done. So for sure, it was pickpocketing,
Right, gotcha.
a bit of purse cutting.
The pettiest pickpocketing, but it was enough to net you into jail. So what happened then, Cadius? Did you feel guilt, or did you feel like, well, crap, my meal ticket's in jail here, or what? What happened?
No, I think that especially being someone who moves around a lot since he left his home, there aren't that many people he's close to. So it was more of a matter of at least this guy's sort of entertaining and exciting, and with him around, it won't be boring. So
Right,
I didn't want to go to the next town all by myself.
right. Okay, cool. So at some point before that breakout, um, there was an occasion where it's like, yeah, this thief he's an all right guy actually. He's not an elf, but he's pretty stand up and he'll keep me entertained. So, Oliver, tell us about what you've done or what happened that kind of convinced Cadius that you were sort of an entertain that life was never boring around you.
I think. Oh, that convinced him. I
Sure.
just have a propensity for opening things that shouldn't be opened, or uh, it's now that I'm beyond the strictures of my own Mercasan society. There's kind of this sense of relief. Why do I need to? None of the rules, all the rules are completely arbitrary. So why shouldn't I take that? We can just leave. We've been traveling from town to town. Uh, so just casual thefts of fruit or anything like that, but running cons to stiff the innkeeper on our bar tab has allowed us to drink more than a few pints that weren't our due.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Good. Lovely. Right. So let's get started on this mask, this masked ball. So did a bit of research on Wikipedia to work out what a mask actually is. That was quite useful. It turns out a mask isn't just like a masquerade ball. It wasn't just your standard Pride and Prejudice. Let's just have a little dance with the upper classes. A mask could have been in the past, certainly in our past, um, something that was much more open to the masses. It was like much more entertainment for everyone in a lot of respects. It was still something that was fairly upper and middle class, something that involved a lot of artistic stuff, like theatrical, particular theatrical or presentation of kind of dioramas, this sort of idea. A lot of ideas of what was it called? Oh, sort of tableaus. This idea of actors presenting a scene, and then the revelers kind of dancing around the scene. But it was something that was done as a lot of people dancing together, not necessarily in your kind of uh, stately manners. It could have happened in all sorts of places. So my thinking is that that's sort of what you guys have stumbled into now. Or potentially, legitimately come here. So let's talk about that. This mask. This mask is celebrating something that's big enough to basically bring the entire town out to party. Upper, middle, and working classes alike. So you've come to the town. You might have been in the town a while, or let's say you've been in the town for 2 weeks, just for the sake of saying something. And you've got wind of this grand event. Either of you, feel free to shout out or converse amongst yourselves. What's this mask celebrating? Is it what upper class thing is this mask celebrating?
What if it's the coming of age of the young lord? So he's being presented for the first time outside the household. He might be aged 6 or 7, and he's now not wearing the white shift of children. He's now, dressed up in a tailored little suit and
Hmm.
being presented.
Perfect. Excellent. Good. So that's who it is. Let's see. I need a name for a 6-year-old. Where were those names I wrote down earlier? They are not here. Let's see. Um,
Tacitus?
Tacitus. Tacitus sounds good. Young Tacitus the Younger. Pro tip for anyone watching: it's always good to call someone the younger because that means you can just call the next person the older. To that end, we've got Tacitus the Younger, we've got Tacitus the Older, his father, parading him about.
I mean, a harvest would be another. Oh, if it's a town, maybe they don't celebrate the harvest in quite the same way.
I like the idea of it being like a young noble or like the young lord of the town um, who's being brought out in celebration. I mean, I feel like it's something that's separate to your regular harvest. It could be a harvest at the same time, but it's in. I think a harvest festival could be something that's quite fun in itself. Whereas this is like, no, the young lord. It's only once this young lord will come of age, so we've really got to put the boat out. Um,
It's more of
so
an event.
yeah, more of a unique event as well. So something that's especially put on to entertain him, but also for the benefit of the masses. Um, I'm going to say it's based in this place, the Chalcedon uh, Imperium. So this kind of shorthand, it's like a steampunky style empire, but in the same token, you've got kind of your capital cities, which are just fully steam and clanking brass. And this place, again, like that port you mentioned earlier, might be more of a frontier town. It might not be super technically savvy. It might just simply have some technical elements which just make life a little bit easier. The
Sure.
odd mechanical horse or horseless carriage or whatnot. We'll work it out as we play.
Let's have a name
Um,
for where we are, shall we?
let us indeed have a name for where we are. Let's see. Um, I am going to go with a name which is going to be something as soon as Google Maps finishes loading and I go to a random place in London, in England. It is going to be, here we are, the town of Pewsey.
Easy, wonderful.
Pewsey!
All right,
The town of
Tacitus, the young
Pewsey.
lord of Pusey.
A Masque in Pewsey. I quite like the idea of, contrary to its rather sort of simplistic name, things might have been quite good for Pewsey in recent years, and it's sort of a town on the up and up. So maybe the land is quite favourable. Maybe there's sort of a pretty verdant rolling fields outside, and it's sort of drawn some more of the rich and famous to settle down there over the years, and it's drawn a bit of a what's it called, like a coterie, a few more manners and whatnot for people,
Right.
say,
Sure.
over the years.
Maybe there's like some
Obviously,
sort of a attraction or something. People might go on holiday, sort of type of thing. You know.
yeah, yeah, that sort of thing. Maybe it's like a seaside resort.
Sure.
Maybe it's something like, or maybe you guys wouldn't get the reference, but somewhere like Brighton might have been, say, which would be kind of it's a place which is like the seaside, and it's the closest sort of seaside relative to a fairly prestigious capital. So, like back in the day, 100 years ago in Victorian times, Brighton was a really, well, it still is a nice enough area, but it was a really well-known area 100 odd years ago because it was very easy to get to from London. So you'd have people from London going down and commuting there and spending a pleasant afternoon on the seaside and on the piers and such. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's Pewsey on Sea or something like that even. But let's just stick with
Yeah.
Pewsey for now. So it's got quite a lot of sort of rich estates. Very good for any thieves looking to line their pockets, of course. It's also got a seaside resort.
I imagine the town has built itself up with a doctor and other services that the nobles would require.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a fair smattering of kind of iron shod buildings and such, where it's like it's not just wattle and daub certainly, and it's not just farmers, make do farmers and your odd taverns here and there. It's you've got a dedicated inn for travellers coming through, and it's a pretty nice one with a very nice, well kept stables um, and yeah, like you say, doctors and whatnot, various other things like that. So whereabouts are you guys? Where have you guys been staying?
Somewhere cheap.
Yeah,
Mhm.
somewhere cheap. We've been here 2 weeks, so it would have to be, would there be some kind of inn attached to a mail station, maybe a mile or two out of the
Sure.
center of the resort area?
Yeah, could be, couldn't it? A little bit further inland. So you guys have been staying about a mile or two away.
I imagine this kind of a fall off with all this beautiful farmland. There would be some uh, little villages and trading posts. Not everybody would come directly into the center of the town
Hmm.
at all times. So there'd be other services in little crossroad villages, within whatever half a mile of it.
Yeah, I like this idea of you guys are sort of staying in the cheapy cheap area or fairly cheap area just to make for the sake of making ends meet. But actually, especially yourself, Oliver, you're kind of dressed up to the nines so you can con all the rich folk. So you're sort of dressing up all nice and posh and proper, but then you're just going back to like the regular farmer's tavern to slum it at night, and just having to take off all your like rich stuff and hang it up all nice and whatever.
I think it would
Um,
be sweat-stained rich stuff
yeah,
with all the
it's
traveling to and fro.
showing some signs of wear, but you're sort of maybe doing the best to kind of keep it neat and tidy. Yeah. um, so cool. Well, let's get started with some rolls because rolls are always good, and we haven't even got to the revels yet, but we'll get to that in a minute. In the 2 weeks, let's say that you've been doing some cons. Who have you been trying to con in particular? What sort of notable names have been in town over the last couple of weeks? Give me some titles of relevant people who might have been passing through town that you've tried to con.
Hmm.
Oliver.
I think so. Any well-to-do farmers that have come in now that there's this convergence of the well-to-do, all the vacations are aligning around this party.
Hmm.
Um, so some minor landed noble
Hmm.
would have tried to certainly make some money off him in cards, dealing out
Yeah.
long sleeves as best I can.
What would that be? A lord? A duke? No, it wouldn't be a lord. Like a no, duke's too big as well. What would the title be? Sir,
It's
maybe.
Yes, I think so.
So let's say he's Sir Eastcastle.
Castle.
Sir Eastcastle was passing through and was foolish enough to sit down for your game of cards, your humble game of cards. Just a pleasant night's entertainment. Um, so let's see how that went. Um, I would say you could roll if you're playing a game of cards. It's defying danger, and you would be defying the danger being you get caught. I'm assuming you're cheating, and you mentioned about using sleight of hand. So let's say that's Dex, because it's really fast hands more than fast talking at this stage.
Yep.
So go ahead and roll Defy Danger using Dex. If you want to, and given the amount of bonds you've got together, I recommend you do aid each other as much as possible. You can totally go ahead and aid him, Oliver, if you just
Yeah.
tell me what it is that you're doing to aid him.
Yeah, I expect. I don't know how common elves are around here, but I expect that an elf walking into the tavern or wherever we are and starting a fight with the first guy he sees is certainly going to take some attention off the game.
Okay? All right, sounds good to me. Well, that's one way of drawing attention, certainly. Yeah, you know what? Screw it. Yeah, let's just call it aid because we don't care about anyone else in this inn. We just care about what's going on in this game. So yeah,
I'm gonna be
call it
tempted
aid.
to break you out of the drunk tank.
Well, one roll at a time, eh? So we got a rolling plus bonds. Just bearing in mind, I know you guys have both got 4 bonds for each other, I believe. The highest possible bonus you can have on any one roll is +3. So
Sure.
You've got surplus. So you're rolling +3, Cadius, and Oliver, you're rolling plus your dex, which was 2.
So Caddy is first, I imagine.
Yep, that's a 9 on that.
9. Okay, so you do help him out, so you're going to get a +1, Oliver, but that does mean that you're also drawn into whatever's going on, which, given the fact that you aided him by starting the fight, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, not surprising.
Yeah. So let's see that roll. Aha, here we go. What's that? A 12. Fantastic. So it was well and truly conned. So here's what happens, I think. The game went pretty well. You were, your hands were moving like lightning. Just fast draw, whatever it was, blackjack, poker, whatever you were playing. Yeah, let's say something akin to poker. So your perfect poker face, perfect hand after hand after hand. He started to suspect sometimes, but then, you know, just you kept an eye on him, and you were smart enough because you are a thief after all. You can keep an eye on these things. So just when he started to suspect, you know, you gave him a little bit back, and then just when he thought he was on a winning streak, you took it all back from him. You took it all back. You took it all back. And say this kind of maybe looped round. This process maybe continued over the course of 2 or 3 hours over the course of the evening, and maybe the last loop, if you like, the last sort of time that he was trying to just getting suspicious, and he sort of took a double take at your hands, and he was just about to comment on something, and then Cadius saw and thought, right, flipped his table over from his quiet drink elsewhere, and took that as a cue to just start pulling a fight on the nearest guy, claiming that he'd spilt his drink or some
This
such
place is clearly a
minor
bit risky
pretense.
for me.
Yeah.
I don't know,
At
I don't
which
know how
point
you run things around here, but
yeah, exactly. At which
I
point you
can't
thought,
game in an environment like this.
so I shall take my winnings and leave. I will not be seen in such a so it won't be seen in such a disreputable area. You just left off in a huff, leaving this guy with
Tomorrow
nothing.
night.
Yeah. So, well, that just leaves us with the with Oliver in the middle of a fight. So, Oliver, let's see. Sorry, I keep saying Oliver instead of Cadius. I don't know why.
Sure, I know what you
Cadius.
meant.
Oliver, you got out scot-free thanks to Cadius's help, but Cadius, you're left in the thick of the fighting. That's no bad thing because you love fighting. You're a fighter, but you got to get your way out of it. So I'm going to say that it's going to be defying danger involving con, because it's not
Okay.
really a case. These guys are just regular bar brawl folks, you know. Most of them are drunk. Most of them aren't fighters. None of them are the fighter. That's who you are. So it's not really a case of whether or not you can kill them. If you want to kill them, you totally can.
Oh, goodness,
It's just a
no.
case of how much they mob you and what licks you take in the process.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm
So
just
go
trying
ahead
to
and roll
keep them
plus
away
one.
from me and basically get a way out. So let's see. That's I think my constitution's 2, so 9. Same
Excellent.
as.
Okay. So again, it's a defy danger, but there is a cost. So you can, let's see, you can avoid getting hurt or getting spotted. So either someone's going to know you instigated the fight after all of this, or you're going to be able to sneak out, but you're going to have to duck your head down and take a few beatings and a few broken bottles thrown over your head in the process. Up to you. Which do you want to avoid?
I'll avoid the damage.
You'll avoid the damage. So,
Yeah.
so someone knows you're like, as you were leaving, you're like, hey, it's the elf, and then right, time for me to go.
Yep.
So someone knows that an elf started that fight, and
Sure.
let's say, fast forwarding now, someone knows that the elf started a fight in what sort of reputable peasant folk inn might have you been in? Let's say the College Arms, something like that. Something that seems vaguely academic, but actually is just a standard piss hole. Yeah, the College Arms. Someone knows that a certain elf, of which there aren't that many in the land, started a big old fight the other day in the College Arms. Cool.
They're bucolic
Back
ones,
to-
you know.
Back to the revels then. So fast forwarding 2.5 days, give or take. Whatever bruises you might have taken are pretty much healed up. And you guys are gearing up for your big con for this night. You're like, right, time to prepare, guys. I guess, Oliver, you're starting us off by saying, right, time to do a big con. We've got loads of people out. So, Oliver, what's the plan? Who are you going to con? How are you going to con them?
An excellent question. I mean, just thinking about all the food that'll be on offer, my stomach's growling, and I haven't been thinking too carefully about how we're gonna scheme this. Well, I'm remembering you said that none of the thieves you've ever played with have remembered to use their poisons. So
Absolutely.
I think definitely we might need to have someone have a little spell and need to be taken away. And perhaps I could slip in with their entourage and have a little gander around the premises.
Okay.
See if anything
Oh, so you want to have a little spy sneaky round and get an idea of the premises beforehand?
Well, no. This would need to be on the evening.
On the evening.
And when does
Sure.
it start? It would start in the evening, or would it?
It starts in the evening. It's the Masque at midnight. It doesn't actually start at midnight. That was just a fun title that rhymed. It actually starts a little bit earlier, a few hours earlier, about sort of 8, 9 o'clock. Broadly speaking, well, actually, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and spout lore for me? And let's see how much you've sort of picked up along the way about the specifics of the night's itinerary.
Okay, so I think
So sorry, just to clarify, spouting lore is a move. Sorry, I should have
you'll
specified
have
that
to,
because it wasn't
yeah,
about
have
the
to
dungeons.
walk me
My
through
bad,
that.
my bad.
That'll
So
be good.
yes, spouting lore is basically when you kind of stop and ponder, and you're like, it's your character going, oh yes, I remember such and such. And basically, it's an option for me to tell you some aspects that your character remembers.
Got it. Okay.
It's you rolling plus intelligence.
Plus intelligence. Yeah, I feared it was.
Mhm.
So that's plus 0 for me.
Okay. On a 7 to 9, I get to tell you something interesting. It's up to you to make it useful. And
I
on a
get a
10
5.
plus, you got a 5, which is brilliant. That means you get to mark experience. So that's the best roll of all because you get a bonus. Okay, so here's the thing. Between all of your other cons and sort of planning and keeping your suit dry cleaned and sneaking out of college arms and such and so forth, you haven't really had a chance to get a sense of what's going on over the night's events. You know it starts about 8 o'clock because that's just the word on the street is everyone knows it starts about 8 o'clock. But you don't really have an idea of what sort of the posh folk are planning to do for this grand ball. You know there's dancing because they're calling it a masque. You know most people are involved. But beyond that, you don't really know what's going on or the movements of where people are going to be. Other than at some point, young Tacitus will be trooped out, bereft of his white shirt and with his whatever on instead to show that he's now come of age. But yeah, again, you're like, okay, I should probably find that out. And it's like, okay, the show's tomorrow. So this is sort of getting to sort of lunchtime of the day, and you're like, okay, so that's what I know. So that's what you know. Now that being said, I mean, I say it's lunchtime, so we do still have a little bit of time. I'm kind of doing just stepping away here and just sort of addressing the audience here for a second in terms of what I'm doing. Normally in Dungeon World, you might do something like more of a cold open where you might say, hey, there's goblins over here and there's spears to your right and there's a trap falling down on top of you. Shit, guys, what do you do? That's kind of the strict kind of in medias res Dungeon World intro. Because we're doing kind of a one-shot here, it's much more fun to kind of ask questions and riff off the answers. And as you can probably see if you're following up to this point, we've already got to quite a good stage without me even having to look at my notes. So I haven't really done a whole lot of pushing, but we are sort of getting towards that stage of doing this kind of cold open. So, yes, where were we? Right, so let's say it's lunchtime. The Masque is due to start about 8 p.m. So that gives you about 8 hours. What do you do in those 8 hours? What is it you're looking to do to try and get the sense of what you could do? You could do a few things. You've spouted lore already, so you know from beforehand there isn't much that the two of you already understand of the events, but you could do a little bit of kind of passive looking around. That would be discerning realities, to kind of get a sense of how things might be laid out, at least at first. You could ask around. I guess that'd be defying danger with charisma. You could do a bit of shopping if you wanted to.
I definitely want to have a look at the premises themselves.
Okay.
I want to get a lay of the land. Is there a garden where the festivities might meander out into?
Yeah. Let's say there's like a central park area. After all, we're near the coast, so lots of sort of lush greenery and lots of nice countryside. Yeah, a nice park. That'll probably be the central location. And obviously everyone's already getting their setting up, but it's open to the public. So you could totally spend sort of the best part of the afternoon and even going into the early evening as the revelers start to appear, having a look around and getting a sense of the land there. While you're doing that, just before you roll, Cadius, what are you up to in the same sort of time? Are you helping Oliver out? Are you doing your own thing? What?
No, I think that, so even though my character's a fighter, I think he's sort of, he almost fancies himself as sort of an amateur actor. So he sees all these cons as like a fun thing he does to, pretend to be someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he would probably kind of get the idea into his head to try and find whoever's arranging the festivities and try and get himself hired on as like a dancer or an acrobat or something, sort of an oddity
Right.
as
Okay,
his
cool.
way in.
A personal oddity. Interesting. Okay, good. Well, that's going to be a couple of rolls on your part. So we're going to sort of
Sure.
chain a couple of moves together in order to get to that stage, because there is a sort of a stage manager. There is one woman who's kind of doing all the organisation and trying to get all the troops out, but she's quite hard to pinpoint because she's flitting left, right, and centre, and she doesn't really want to stop for just any old person. So you've got to sort of find her and collar her suitably, which I'm going to call is defying danger in plus charisma, because you're kind of using social grace to kind of catch her eye at an opportune moment. Then once you've actually got her attention, probably be a parley to try and manipulate her into, joining the troop. But we'll cross that bridge, I think, once we see how the first roll went. So we've got a discern realities from Oliver, which is going to be rolling plus wisdom, and we've got a defying danger with charisma for Cadius. So why don't you both go ahead and roll now?
Sorry, mine's charisma, as you said, right?
Sorry, yours was wisdom. Wisdom is like this discern realities is kind of the closest thing to a perception roll. That's a gross oversimplification, but it is very much what that is. Discern realities is you taking stock of the situation as it is, as opposed to kind of thinking back on stuff you already are aware of, which is what Spout Law is all about. In this case, you've got a 5? If not, you've got six. So you're marking experience, and something's going to happen to you, and you're probably not going to like it. But we'll come back to that in a second. And on the other side of the coin, we've got Cadius, who has got he's aced his charisma roll. We've got a very charismatic fighter here who's managed to collar the stage manager, who we shall call. Let's see. I don't know. Need a posh female name.
Esdarine?
Esdarine, perfect. Esdarine, the stage manageress. Running around with her armoured clipboard, throwing trestles on this table and planning these people here and throwing costumes on this side and doing this and doing that. But you've managed. How did you do it then? How did you manage to collar her and actually get her attention? Cadius.
Yeah, I think I probably would have been sort of approaching people who are like under her and sort of talk to each person up the chain and trying to ingratiate myself with them and saying, it would be surely a wonderful thing if I were there.
Sure.
And I'll mention that you recommended me. So we go from the assistant, the assistant's assistant to the assistant, and so on.
You're like, oh, don't worry about bringing the coffee. I'll get the coffee. You go stretch your legs. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Working your way up from there until there you were at the in front of the stage manager, who's like who you're now, I guess, presenting with a coffee. So there we are. You're there with the stage manager now. At the same time as this is happening, as it happens, Oliver, you're kind of getting the lay of the land. You're trying to kind of get your way around, but you're finding it quite tricky. There's everyone moving around and so much going on, I suppose, and stuff moving around so quickly because they're still setting up, and they're setting up all afternoon. If you've gone there for, say, 1, 2 o'clock, they're still setting up by sort of 4, 5 o'clock. So you're sort of there and you're trying to get a sense of what's going on, but it's very, very tricky. That being said, I am still going to let you ask one question from the list. So if you check your chat in a moment, I'm just going to get the link for you guys. There's a great website which has got the rules for
the SRD, isn't it?
Yep, you can use the SRD, or there's also the book.dwgasadier website, which I often use. So there's the link, just for quick reference. It's in the chat. There we go. And on that page, under Discern Realities, you've got your questions. So why don't you go ahead and ask me one of those questions?
Oh, I got one. I'm going to go with what here is useful or valuable to me.
Very cool. So, yes, in terms of what is useful or valuable to you, what would be, just to recap, what would be useful or valuable to you? What would be useful or valuable for you to know right now? The place where they're dining, I guess, right? Because you want to put the poison in the food. Is that right?
I think what I'm trying to get a sense of, where's the boundary between the area where guests are expected to go and where only servants or actual members of the household would be expected to go.
Right. Okay. I would say that the boundaries are they're actually kind of thin, if you see what I mean, because everyone's kind of brought out to the park. Everyone's here, and to some extent, everyone's mingling. The upper classes, the lower classes, everyone's going to be mingling together and dancing together. It's that kind of ceremony. That being said, there is kind of a servants. What's the name for one of those big tents? It's like a yurt almost. You know, one of these
Pavilion?
very pavilion. That's the word I'm looking for. Yes, there is a pavilion which has been set up specially for kind of preparation of the nicer food. You know, there'll be the mutton and the mead out for the proles, but yes, there'll be much more nicer food prepared, which will be brought out specifically for the upper classes to eat, probably at their own trestle tables at the far end where the young Tacitus will be dining and kind of enjoying the revels personally.
So did I get an impression as to whether any of the public proceedings are happening inside the house itself? The manor.
That's not one of your questions, but it is fairly obvious because I would say that the house is probably not nearby. After all, this is like a public park, right? This is like,
I see.
yeah, this is happening in a very public space. All of this is happening in a very, very public space. Although there are rich houses, and some of them may be relatively nearby, probably the closest one might be, say, half a mile. And all the upper classes are going to start proceeding down in the next few hours and setting themselves up. And as
Very good.
so there aren't any houses particularly nearby. The only thing which is really set aside in terms of what's useful and valuable to you, in terms of getting to a useful spot for kind of food where you might not be seen, probably that palace, the pavilion, that large pavilion. If you can sneak in there unspotted, you can kind of disguise yourself as a servant or whatever. That would be a good place to get into perhaps the right food.
Excellent.
Unspotted. However, and this is your 6 minus coming into play. However, in the process of you kind of blundering about and trying to get a sense of, hey, where are all the rich people going and where are all the poor people going? Just asking. You know, you're kind of blundering about and asking these questions. And this, you're kind of, unfortunately, you're having to be a bit unsubtle about it, less subtle, much less subtle than you'd like. You're not being, I'm being facetious just there. You're not literally just cawing like a maniac, but you are having to sort of raise your voice and collar people in a much less subtle motion. You know, someone's pulling about, and unlike our fine, graceful fighter here, who can just, you know, breeze through social gatherings, clearly, you're having to really collar a guy and say, look, I'm trying to find out such and such. And it's quite distracting, and as it happens, wouldn't you know it, it's happening very close to where Cadius is trying to have his discussion with our stage manager. And she's being quite distracted by this sort of slightly mutton dressed as lamb nobleman called Oliver, who's kind of collaring servants left, right, and centre a short distance away. So, Cadius, when you're kind of discussing things with Esdarine, you're going to take a -1 on going because she keeps getting distracted by that.
Okay.
Who's that? Who is that? Sorry, who are you? Oh, thanks for the coffee, sort of thing. So, to that end. So she's taking your coffee. She keeps looking over at this boorish fellow to her left, and then she keeps getting distracted by other stuff as well. But you've caught as much of her attention as you're likely to get. What do you do?
Sure. So I'm going to basically explain that.
Oh, have we?
I'm here, but I'm. What's that?
Sorry, Cadius. I think we lost you a bit there. Do you want to just say that part again?
Yeah, so I'm going to explain that I'm a professional performer, but I'm not looking for payment. I just want a chance to be seen, basically, and hopefully attract the attention of some of the nobles. You know, I'll probably do a demonstration of some somersaults or something like that, and just explain that, you know, sort of play it up as like, you know, there's not that many elves around here. You know, you can sell it however you want. You know, make it seem like it's something really strange, and you know, announce it however you want, and it'll be a really stupendous thing.
So cool. So once she realizes you're an elf, you know, maybe you pull your hood aside when you're talking. Say, thanks to meet you. As you give her the coffee, putting your hood aside, and she sees the elven ears.
Sure.
Are elves radically different from humans in this world? Do they look like for example, you've got your kind of Lord of the Rings elves, which are tall humans with pointy ears and can handle their beers better than dwarves for some reason, because Jack is an idiot. Or you've got, say, something like the Elder Scrolls games, where elves are actually quite a bit different. You know, they're not just taller, but their proportions are kind of stretched and elongated. You know, how different do you look as an elf?
I think that the overall body shape is human, but they're more very, very lean and thin.
Mhm.
So sort of longer fingers, maybe something like the stereotypical Martian with the long, thin fingers,
Mhm.
and sort of more of an angular, sleek head
Sure.
that sort of stretches back into the stereotypical ears. So
Sure.
definitely something that's notable if you get a good look at them. That it's
Absolutely.
clearly not human.
The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is you look fairly savage. I mean, you are from the savage peeps.
Yes.
So you have got, as noted in your look, you've got wild hair and scarred skin. So that's something that would probably take her notice. She'll probably see a warrior. It'd be hard not to see a warrior in front of her, and an elf.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely enough for her to take her notice. It sounds like, coming back to your original point, it sounds like what you're trying to do is parlay. You're trying to manipulate her into getting something you want, which is to take part in the proceedings. However, in order to parlay, you need leverage, and leverage is something that they need or want. Now, she explains to you that, oh yes, you know, once she realizes you're an elf and she hears you out, and she hears about what you can do. And she says, well, that's fascinating, but we do have a lot of fascinating exotic performers, such and such and so and so. And she kind of vaguely motions in the direction of kind of this central stage, which is already being set up. And you can see in the distance, you see a kind of troops of actors kind of setting themselves up there. But she says, well, what we're really trying to do here is trying to put on a tableau, and the tableaus involve my troupe will be basically miming. They'll be standing still for the ceremony. They'll be performing a artistic piece whereby they'll be depicting a scene, and that scene will be played out by the dancing that goes on around them. So while I appreciate your acrobatics, and that would come in useful, it would always be useful to have someone who can easily get in and out of scene. What we're really looking for is someone who can, you know, hold their own. Can you do that? And now she's kind of really, can you do that? Sip. She's like got your attention now. You've got her attention. So she's like, I'd like to see if you can really, you know, hold a pose. See if you can do this. And she like motions over one of the younger actors, a young halfling. A young halfling comes over, a young female halfling, and she goes, Marissa, can you put out the, can you just play the part of such and such in scene 2, in tableau 2 for tonight's ceremony? And this young halfling kind of quickly kind of jumps into this kind of stock still motion, this stock still scene of some kind of let's see here, what did I have in mind for tableau 2? I actually did have something in mind here, but I've forgotten it because I wrote it earlier. She puts herself into a vaguely soldier-like role. You know, it's kind of this miming motion of a spear forward, and this halfling just absolutely freezes stock still. And she stays stock still for like half a minute. She just, you know, you can't even see her breathe. She's that good. It's like you're almost like you're looking at a statue. And then Ezradine, the stage manager, she turns to you and says, right, you do that. And she asks you to hold the motion. She says, do it for a minute and you're in. So what I'd like you to do, Cadius, is, again, I think I'd like you to roll plus con. Let's see if you can
Sure.
let's see how long you hold that pose for.
Yeah, so in my head, I'm figuring, like, you know, this isn't too different from going out hunting in the mountains and, you know, waiting an hour or something for a deer. So I'm like, yeah, I got this. But we'll see if I actually do. And I don't.
Nope.
That's a 5.
So absolutely, yeah, you've got it, and you're like in your mind thinking, perfect, this is great. This is no different to hunting goats in the mountains. Great, I've even got the weapon. Well, what do you have again? You've got your hands, haven't you?
Yeah,
So,
well, I wouldn't have come armed to
No.
to meet this woman.
Oh, sure. So you're miming this sort of spear holding pose, this hunter's pose. And for a second, she's like, oh, brilliant. You're just like, oh, that's it. She's holding it like that. And then you've got, kind of the distraction of Oliver saying, look, can you just, and you hear it in the background, and you hear it, and it's just enough for you to kind of, your eyes dart, because it's like, you hear it and your ears prick up, your elven ears prick up at Oliver kind of raising his voice, and you're thinking, oh crap, who's arresting him now? And that's enough to distract you. Go just to dodge your head, you're keeping the pose, but you're just like, and then she's like, what's that? What was that? What was that? We can't be doing anything with that. You can't be checking around and looking around. There's going to be people around you. No, this won't look at all. Marissa, you go back to what you're doing here. And where's my... And she's off and she's gone. And you're like, damn. So that's where you're at. And that's sort of... I'm sure you'll be doing other things over the course of this day, but that's the most eventful thing that happens over the course of the day up until the revels begin themselves. So what we're going to do is I am going to stop the broadcast right now. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break. I'm going to come back to it, and we will be picking this up in about 5 minutes. All right? I shall see you guys momentarily. All right? Cheers.
Excellent.